Hello, listeners. Many of you are already aware, Bungie has suffered massive layoffs across the entire studio, from the frontline community management team to multiple indispensable quality assurance teams, from the consistently exceptional music teams to the artists creating breathtaking work, and along with many, many more across multiple departments. We wanted to edit in a small segment before this week's episode went live to raise awareness of the tremendous amount of talent that was displaced on Monday, the 30th of October 2023. We, the Podcast vs. Enemies hosts, our audio engineer Autodidaktos, and the whole Destiny Massive Breakdowns family, including our patrons, sponsors, Discord server members, and our listeners, want to extend our thoughts to everyone that's been affected. If there's anything we can provide, then please do not hesitate to reach out to us. For our listeners, if you know of any open positions in the gaming, software, or any other similar industries, then please pass that information onto those affected. To also quickly highlight, there are unconfirmed rumours that the final shape has been delayed to June 2024. At the time of recording this segment, which is Tuesday the 31st of October, 2 p.m. Eastern US time zone, Bungie has made no official public statement regarding this delay or the layoffs. There's no doubt that this news casts a dark shadow across the game we passionately enjoy, from gushing over and critiquing new content, exotics, abilities, raids, and much, much more. We've certainly been through thick and thin with this franchise, and it's only natural to be concerned for what is to come. Well, we have started to discuss behind the scenes how this news will affect this podcast in the long term. Today is not the day to share any brash decisions. We know many folks from the DMB community, the general Destiny community, and even some Bungie developers listen to our show, so we will continue to produce episodes for the foreseeable future. We hope our podcast continues to shine bright like a beacon of light and positivity. The rest of this week's episode, which is beginning shortly, remains unaltered and was recorded the day before the news. We do have some classic PvE discussion on the upcoming Season 23 weapons changes. And of course, the three of us can't wait to get our very first community guest on next week's show. Before we pass it over to the episode proper, we're going to speak candidly here. Unfortunately, Impetus isn't here, just with the work commitments. We're kind of recording this a little bit on the fly here. But I am joined by Saint. Saint, how are you feeling?
It's just incredibly sad to see, man. So many talented people let go yesterday. It's all I see when I open up Twitter, when I open up LinkedIn. I've counted at least 30 different people at this point. Tenure of a year, tenure of 20 years. It seems like it just didn't matter. Some of the people I even worked with directly, including the recruiter who initially hired me and gave me a chance for the contract that I was on at Bungie last year. People that worked in support groups that would show up to Crucible playtests just because they cared about the game and were invested in it. And that kind of passion for the thing that you work on can be really hard to find. And it just makes it even more sad. Yeah, myself was laid off from a job early last year, and I know the feeling all too well. I really hope that everybody that was affected by this can find new work and be moving on from it soon to do what they love. Court?
Yeah, it's just a shit time, really, to be very candid. Just very dynamic time of events right now. I cannot relate with being let go with any jobs that I've been in as a position of, but I've certainly seen it firsthand. Working in retail, it's a very volatile environment when it comes to folks being kind of made redundant or kind of getting pushed out. But yeah, it's like completely devastating news. It's just a lot of community sentiment going about. I think, yeah, it's just really terrible news. And you know, we're recording this a day after the story when that all started breaking. And I feel like the story keeps going. I've just kind of been reading a little bit of some other comments, some other kind of things that may be going on during today, Tuesday. But it's very dynamic kind of turn of events. But yeah, my heart obviously goes out to all of those that are affected, but also those that have managed to survive any of these layoffs, because we can't imagine how they're feeling. You know, survivors' kind of guilt. You've managed to keep your position at Bungie, but you've lost so many colleagues, so many friends, so many people that you'd passionately work on this game, play this game. It's just devastating, man.
Yeah, how do you just go back to work after a day like that? I don't know. And I think that you're right. We're probably going to have to wait until maybe the end of this week to see how all the dust settles and if there's any more official announcements or statements or anything like that. But truly not looking good. A dark day for Destiny as a community and just Bungie as a whole. All right. Well, on that note, let's get into episode 84 of PvE.
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 84 of Podcast vs Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdown show. My name is Court and I'm joined as usual by my Titan and Warlock counterparts, Saint and Impetus. This week we have a shorter episode as we discuss the upcoming Season 23 and beyond changes to the weapons sandbox. I hope you lads are doing well. Saint, what have you been up to?
Been celebrating Festival of the Lost in-game, celebrating Halloween out of the game. It's been a good week, always a fun time of the year. Kind of rounding out some of those Crota weapons, getting everything crafted and put away. Been having an absolute blast with Swordbreaker. It's just awesome weapon. Kind of unexpected highlight of that set for me, honestly. Little Starfield, little haunted lost sectors, and honestly, that's pretty much about it this week in the game front. Having some PC issues. I did a whole deep clean rebuild on the PC, and it's been okay since then, but it may finally be time for a new CPU pretty soon. Impetus, how about you, man? What you been up to?
I also celebrated Halloween last night a little too hard, so if my voice sounds a bit rougher than normal, you can blame it on some karaoke. In Destiny, I have been playing a lot of PvP, surprisingly. I was hopping in there with my mask on to round out some event challenges for Festival of the Lost, and then just started playing pretty well. I picked up my Crafted Austringer and then decided to take Cloud Strike into Control and was having a blast. Got to hit some collabs with Cloud Strike. I'm a huge fan of the gun now. And then, of course, outside of that, doing haunted lost sectors, still chasing those mementos. I want to get one at least for all of my crafted menagerie weapons. I think those look pretty cool, all black. So I've got, I think, 4 more mementos that I need to get before everything's up. But yeah, it's been nice. We got, I think it's Iron Banner. Is it next week or is it the final week that we have our last Iron Banner of this season? But I've been getting warmed up for that at least, so that feels good, so that I can really grind out a good bit of that. Court, how about yourself? What have you been up to this past week?
Doing well. No PvP for me this week, but I have been doing some Grandmasters and raids as per usual, just running off a few challenges, just doing some runs for those that require any GMs this season. Haven't had the best of loot the last 2 weeks. I know by the time this episode comes out, it'll be a different week, but the week that we're recording, it's the Swarm, which is disappearing anyway. And then before that, it was I can't remember what the weapon was.
Buzzard.
But it's not been
It was
great.
the sidearm.
Yeah, buzzard. Yeah.
Oh, the buzzard.
Two weapons I don't really care about. Outside of Destiny, playing a lot of Stardew Valley again. Now into year 2, halfway into spring, just setting up my farm as usual. Just having a blast really playing that. I know we're kind of in the couple of weeks kind of interlude between one season to the next, so we're not really playing a lot of Destiny. Still playing a little bit, at least compared to last season. Playing City Skylines 2. Don't want to get into the rabbit hole of the kind of performance issues that game's been getting since its release last week, but it's a city builder. I do love my city builders, construction simulation kind of type of games, so it's up my street. So trying to make it work and playing some more Uncharted 4 on the PC.
Nice.
All right, Saint, who are we thanking this week?
Yeah, to start off, got to shout out a new patron, B Ruff. Thank you for joining the ranks of the patrons. It is greatly appreciated, and it helps keeps the show going, keeps the lights on, all the infrastructure, support for the show, all that kind of stuff. And as always, I want to shout out our sponsors who go above and beyond in their support for us. Modern Viking, Asking Monk, Bryce Aroni, Deacon, I'm K. Rose, Moonlight, and This Moment. You can send us all kinds of feedback about the show via our socials. Destiny Massive Breakdowns Discord servers are a great place. We have a channel specifically to talk about the show, what you can find called PvE. All kinds of feedback, constructive, critical, positive, help with the trajectory of the show and how we present info in each and every episode. We also want to thank everybody that supports the show by tuning in every week, leaving reviews, just listening or watching to episodes wherever you may find the show. If you would like to go above and beyond yourself and support us via Patreon, you can find a link to the Patreon at destinymassivebreakdowns.com. You'll get access to a members-only channel and the Discord, some behind-the-scenes info, Q&A, and all kinds of input on the show, like questions for our upcoming episode with a special guest that we'll be talking about again in just a second. But for now, what are we talking about this week?
This is going to be a bit of a lighter one. We were not quite sure on a topic for PvE University. We've mostly been getting ready for our PvE University episode next week. And then kind of out of the blue, Bungie stepped in and saved us here and decided to drop the Season 23 weapons preview in a Wednesday article this past week. So we're just going to be discussing the body of that from a PvE point of view. And of course, we're also getting ready for next episode 85. We will have Rock DC hopping on to discuss DPS, all things DPS, for that upcoming episode of PvE University. So that's next week's episode 85. Coming up there, we will have a community guest on. But let's get back to both the weapons preview article and then the 1026 TWID that came out the following day. The TWID had one big piece of information for us, and that's just we will have the ability to access our vault while we are in orbit, which will be a pretty nice quality of life thing. I think most of the time, at least speaking for myself, but I'd imagine for both of you two and plenty of other Destiny players, when I'm in orbit, I'm pulling out my dim and getting weapons to drop in there before I go into an activity. So this should take kind of another feature and put that into the game for us, so that will be very handy. Was it also this week's TWID that they mentioned the changes to mod costs for ghosts, or was that last week's that I forgot about?
Yeah, they're like all going down pretty much, or
yes,
a lot of them
dramatically going down. Yeah. So that was this week's. Okay, that makes me feel a little better. Thought I was remembering that correctly. So again, another huge quality of life change. We love to see it. And then we did get the Season 23 weapons preview. Again, most of the stuff we're going to be talking about will be coming in Season 23. There's a little bit at the end that will be coming in the final... Sorry, not the final season, because that is Season 23. They'll be coming in the final shape, the expansion as well. We got some teases. But for most of this stuff, again, it will be Season 23 changes here. I will kick things off with Bungie's philosophy regarding weapon balancing in PvE, because they did give us a list of questions that they try and answer for every single weapon archetype, and then I'll pass you back to Court to talk about our first weapon archetype that was getting a change here. So When it comes to weapon balancing from the point of view of the PvE sandbox, there are 5 questions that Bungie likes to, or the weapons team at Bungie likes to consider their philosophy. The first question being, what is the intended role for the weapon? What ammo type does the weapon use? How safe is it to use the weapon? How easy is the weapon to use? And how much damage per second, which is an acronym of DPS, you commonly hear us throw that around. How much damage per second does that weapon do compared to other options? These are all the same kind of questions that we use when we're talking about weapons, when we do a weapon breakdown episode. We just don't really outline that as clearly, but this is the same philosophy that every content creator that does a weapon breakdown uses, right? What is the intended role? How safe is it to use? How easy is the weapon to use? How much damage per second does it do compared to other options? Ammo type is also something I don't think we factor in a whole lot, but it does matter for a few things, especially on the special weapon side of stuff. But yeah, these are the big 5 questions here. Whenever you start looking at weapons that land into your inventory, Bungie's thinking about the same thing. Hopefully you're thinking about these questions and the answers to them when you're considering whether or not to hold on to weapons. So let's actually get into some of the changes here. Court, was our first big weapon archetype that is getting a change in Season 23?
Yeah, so it's auto rifles, which will be getting a increased damage against rank and file enemies, which is your square icon enemies, by 10%. And they actually used auto rifles as an example. I won't go through the full list of each point, 1 through 5. But the big point that I wanted to make was that for now, auto rifles are using primary ammo, but I think that's a little tease to the upcoming support weapons where you can like fire off a beam of healing energy. I think that's what they're kind of alluding to. Maybe we'll get some special auto rifles, like kind of in the vein of Ariana's Vow. But yeah, if you want to read that up, it's obviously in the TWID. It's a very interesting read just from their perspective of how they approach these. You know, auto rifles versus SMGs are very similar. SMGs are less range compared to auto rifles. So auto rifles kind of have to be balanced around the fact you can use it at more of a kind of midder range compared to SMGs. But yes, to round things up, 10% increase to your trash ads here. So with each list here, so we're talking about our auto rifles. Next up, we'll talk about pulses. We're going to give some examples, some synergies, just kind of look forward to for next season. The big one here, the big 2, Necrochasm, which is getting its own change later on in the episode. We'll talk about that. But again, Quicksilver Storm gets even stronger with these changes. And to be honest, it's just such a fantastic gun. I love Quicksilver Storm. It is your kind of jack of all trades. Saint just put in the script here, sweet business. Yes, that is definitely an auto rifle. Yeah, like these exotics, I think auto rifle exotic weapons have always been such a great experience, especially Quicksilver Storm. Legendaries, the one we wanted to really highlight is Rufus's Fury, which you can get from Root of Nightmares. Fairly easy to get. It's a fairly easy raid, as we've discussed before. If you can get that crafted, it is just such a solid weapon. It is kind of the legendary version of the Catalyst Quicksilver Storm. It's just without the whole grenade kind of build. And then the final point we wanted to make here about auto rifles is adaptives. They received a mid-season change in regards to their damage buff this season, season 22. And just to be very clear, adaptives kind of incorporate a lot of weapons, including exotic weapons, some of them anyway. So Monte Carlo received this buff, Suros Regime, Hardlight, and also the following legendaries to look out for. So Perpetualis, Coronach 22, Old Sterling, Duty Bound, The Summoner, and of course Gnawing Hunger, which is still in my vault, always ready to be used. So yeah, there's some big highlights to look out for. I think especially adaptives, because they've received the mid-season update, and then they'll obviously receive it again on top of the global change to all rifles. You guys got any other kind of highlights you wanted to bring up here?
You know, Garden of Salvation is primed up for a weapon refresh next season. Now, we haven't heard anything confirmed about this, but this is kind of like the cadence at which things have been going. It was like this time last year when Deepstone Crypt got its refresh, right? So if that is the case and that goes through, then my eye is on Reckless Oracle, a rapid fire void auto from back then that had honestly really limited. Those weapons had 4 traits in the 2 final slots, and I really love this weapon, and honestly just all of the weapons from that raid, and would be absolutely ecstatic to see this thing come back and get some new traits and Void 3.0 traits added in, all that kind of stuff. Just get a good rework. Really, really would love to see that. That and Sweet Sorrow is, we praise Sweet Sorrow a lot. The ARC auto rifle from back in, I can't remember what season.
Risen.
Season of the Risen.
Yep, season 16.
I was going to say the number, 16. Just another great weapon. Love that guy.
Fantastic origin trait as well. One of the best.
Yeah, I mean, Gnawing Hunger is still in the top 3, arguably the best Void auto rifle in the game. Doesn't have an origin trait, doesn't have Void 3.0 perks, drops from not Dares, right? Is it now just Xur? I can't remember where you can get Gnawing Hunger. It's crazy how long that gun has been in the rotation as a dominant option. We did get Age Old Bond, of course, but that's a 360 RPM. Not exactly the most popular auto rifle archetype. So yeah, here's hoping Reckless Oracle could come in and really dominate in a pretty big way for Void auto rifles, maybe potentially even dethrone Gnawing Hunger as the best in slot, but we'll see.
Yeah, let's see. I don't think that you can... I think that Gnawing Hunger will show up in the featured section of Banshee's loot pool occasionally.
Oh, okay.
Which is rare, but possible. I sat down and did a bunch of analysis of like every single weapon that could and could not appear in those loot pools this past week, trying to get a better idea of world loot drops. Moral of the story is they're low, like 1.15% kind of low. And that is getting better next season till like 1.6% or something like that. But yeah, all that to say, Gnawing Hunger can show up in that second category of weapons, which hopefully will be sticking around despite the new weapon focusing stuff that is removing, I think, just like that front page, so to say.
Yeah, some other highlights. So we've got Crate, which again came out season 16 as the sort of world drop loot pool. We've also got Amit. Obviously, that's been receiving a lot of attention recently for more reasons than one. We had Dark Decider, which is a more recent Iron Banner auto rifle. What else we got here? We've got
didn't Amit get some kind
outlook.
of specific nerf to it?
Yeah, it was.
It was a zoom change.
It was a zoom.
Oh,
zoom
yeah,
change.
that's right.
Yeah, they're really trying to flatten all that out.
Yeah.
And this season, Abyss Defiant, if you're into high impacts, and I'm not that big fan of high impacts for all rifles, but it's a very recent addition. I think a lot of folks are chasing for their craftable Crota's Ends weapons, so lots of choice when it comes to all rifles.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what's our next archetype?
Yep, go ahead, Impetus.
We got pulse rifles. One of the weaker primary families for PvE. They are hoping to adjust that a little bit here. Pulse rifles are getting increased damage against rank and file enemies. That again, that's the square icon enemies by 12.5%. And then increased damage against elite enemies, which are your enemies with a shield icon, by 12.5%. So 2 different buffs to 2 different fields of enemies there. That's going to be interesting whether or not that will be enough to kind of push them into the rotation. Again, one of the big frustrations with pulse rifles is they're a very popular champion primary mod, but they're not very strong by themselves as weapons go, primary weapons go. So this would be really nice to have just kind of a stronger base, a stronger floor of damage for pulse rifles. Hopefully this gets them kind of going, because we do have some really excellent PvE pulse rifles out there. I mean, on the exotic side, you've got Bad Juju, Outbreak Perfected, Revision 0, which is also getting its own change. Again, we'll touch on that in a bit here. Collective Obligation, Graviton Lance has been, I know Court's been really loving that since the rework here. Even on the Legendary side, though, there are tons of really, really strong options on paper, but in practice, they just have not been in a lot of people's inventories outside of the times that we have a Pulse Rifle Champion mod in the artifact. You've got Oversoul Edict, brand new. We've got Shattering Bone, Disparity, Smite of Moraine, New Purpose, Peace of Mind, the BXR Battler. It would be really cool to see these become hopefully as used in PvE as they tend to be in PvP, where they definitely are a bit more dominant. So I'm excited. I think the exotic ones definitely be fine, but of course the exotics have a baked in 40% extra damage to those rank and file enemies, so that'll be getting bumped up even more. Graviton will be excellent. Outbreak will be excellent. Revision 0 is going to be brutal for, again, reasons we'll touch on in a bit here. But yeah, you guys think you'll be considering legendary pulse rifles a little bit more in non-champion content, assuming we don't have a pulse rifle champion mod next season?
Maybe. Like, it's at least on the table, and I think that this should get them closer to where scout rifles are on average. Like, if we're just looking like archetype to archetype, I think that this should get, pulse rifles and scout rifles like a little bit more in line. Obviously, scouts are still going to have more just like overall damage output, and there's going to be, probably hand cannons and some stuff like that are still going to be beating them out if you're willing to get within like 30 meters. But yeah, this definitely has me really excited. I'm honestly already big Revision 0 enjoyer these days. So seeing this thing get that extra 12% bump up, 12.5% bump up is really nice. And I also just love the Battler. Going back to this list of like legendaries, I think if I'm going to be using one, it's probably going to be that demo Incandescent Battler, just because I love the weapon. And if I got even a modicum of an excuse to use it, it's going to be putting the load out for a minute. How about you, Court?
Yeah, you can see why like Bungie have been a little bit hesitant when it comes to pulse rifles. Yeah, they've been kind of in the dirt for quite a while, but it kind of goes back to their philosophy where, these weapons are relatively safe to use at a far enough range. Just calling back to like the whole discussion about sniper rifles and how they've just been really lacking for many, many seasons now. And that's just because they are very easy to use. And you don't want to just buff them by 100% because then everyone's going to use them, and then it just completely invalidates a lot of encounter designs. A lot of moving parts when it comes to like weapon balancing and then activity balancing. But pulses, I think this will be pretty fine. I think I'm still going to be using Outbreak Perfected and Graviton Lance if I'm thinking of a pulse rifle to use with a champion mod. But I have been using Oversoul Edict a lot, and it feels really good, very crispy. I've got the demo Volt Shot roll just now. I do like Disparity. Something about Disparity, with it being a stasis weapon, and then it has... it's one of our kind of more recent weapons that got one for all, and I've got rapid hit on that as well. It just feels really solid for a 4-burst. BX Battler, yeah, that's a very good point. I've always enjoyed that. I also have that demo Incandescent roll. It's another weapon that just feels really crispy to use. And of course, Peace of Mind is our classic, once again, from one of the best seasons.
Yeah, it's got Land Tank on there again, just like Sweet Sorrow, right?
I think this will be a very good change. The reason I put Bad Juju in this list as well is because we talked about it last week in regards to the Hunter exotics with the Blade Barrage exotic and Celestial Nighthawk, if you want to pair it with those, just to kind of really tap into the whole super generation. Bad Juju doesn't hit as hard as, say, Outbreak Perfected or Collective Obligation or Revision 0, especially with these changes, but it's definitely an option if you want to use it in more kind of, middling type of content. Maybe not something I would use in GMs, but the option's there. But yeah, really looking forward to it. Yes, Graviton Lance is it's always my go-to. Love that little pulse rifle. Love the look. Love the sound.
This isn't something that I would ever recommend to listeners, but for me, I feel like there's a bit of a friction here between pulse rifles and then Bungie's efforts to really increase the viability of our short range builds that we have. Titans, of course, have really gotten a big overhaul in that short range combat zone with Banner of War more recently, and then again we'll be bringing up something that I think could really work out for Warlocks in the close range space, assuming that the synergy works next season. I keep thinking of that middle distance as something that I can just make into a shorter distance by moving and then taking advantage of some of these really strong aspects, exotic armors that let me live when I'm surrounded by enemies. And so instead of needing a pulse rifle in these spaces, I find myself swapping to either an auto rifle, or if I can really get close and feel safe in something like, these legend haunted lost sectors, an SMG even. So I hope that these pulse rifle changes will work out for me, but I've just gotten so used to playing in a shorter space more recently that I'm wondering if these changes are gonna come for me a season too late, because at this point it's like, well, okay, can I get close enough? If I can't get close enough, then I should probably be staying back. And if I'm gonna be staying back, I'll probably just rock a scout rifle. I'm not sure if there's gonna be a distance range where pulse rifles would feel really necessary. Although, again, there are exceptions. Like I think the VXR Battler is a great one. Yes, it gets Demo Incandescent. It also gets Pugilist Incandescent, which is really nice, especially if you want to be on Solar Titan. You accidentally get rid of your hammer and you need to get that melee charge back quickly. That could be an option where it could just roll up and be hip firing, because of course the frame on the Battler really allows for accurate hip fire. Getting kills there, having that incandescent proc, and then I'm also getting melee energy from Pugilist. So I'm not writing off all pulse rifles, but I do think it'll probably come down to just a handful of them that I would consider taking in for that short to mid range space. We're so strong now, and that's a great fantasy, but it also does put a lot of pressure on your mid range weapons. I feel like we're always going to either try to make it a short range engagement, or if that's not on the table, turn it into a longer range engagement where you've got friction from scout rifles. So that's just me, though. I mean, I'm just speaking as the way that I approach gameplay here. We'll see. Things change, of course.
I was just looking at Mossy's outgoing damage spreadsheet. Shout out Mossy. And doing some quick math. 12% on all the pulse rifle legendary frames will pretty much put them around your lightweight scout rifle category. So not quite rapid fires, which are still going to edge that out a little bit, but they should be comparable feeling to like a lightweight scout and around right around the same time, or damage output for champs and for just like red bars. So there will be parity there, at least. Even to your point, it'll have to come down to like a pulse rifle that really stands out to make you use it over a scout that similarly stands out. But yeah, it at least should put it right on par, which seems good. It's a good place to start, at least for pulse rifles getting bumped up.
Absolutely. And speaking of getting bumped up, what's our next option here? That our special weapon that we've been teased as global change here, saying what is happening at long last to the glaives?
We have got a lot of changes coming down the line for glaives next season. So we'll start off with the three kind of main categories that they are changing, and they're pretty dramatic changes here. So first up is the projectile of the glaive. Increased projectile speed by 30%. This is kind of targeted at the idea that impulse amplifier felt necessary or almost mandatory sometimes for glaives, especially with faster moving enemies or trying to use against players in PvP. It just, seemed so mandatory that they're just going to bump it up and then let impulse amplifier be a double down kind of, so to say, on top of that. We also have an increase in the projectile damage in PvE by 25%. Really huge buff there. Next up is the melee category. Reduce the delay after firing before you can melee from 0.75 seconds to 0.2 seconds. So huge cut down again on that category right there. Big change there. You're kind of close to melee activations and stuff like that are going to be even easier. We'll see how that affects some DPS combos once that hits the game. And then in our third category here, we have the Glaive Shield. The Glaive Shield will now recharge energy passively when the glaive is held at a rate of 1% per second. So if you just have the glaive out, you are getting 1% shield energy per second to charge while it's out. So not just dependent on landing those shots anymore, and going to be even easier to have really high uptime on that shield. Now, there are a lot of synergies here. We'll kind of each talk about our class perspective a little bit, and maybe some builds that we want to get into. I'll just throw out a few examples here. We've got our class glaives that we memed around on and did some GM runs last season with. Fun, but not quite effective. We've got Vexcalibur from the exotic mission, from a couple seasons ago. Winterbite, the heavy exotic glaive. And then Hunter's Triton Vice is a armor piece that has some significant glaive interaction. Cord, I'll give that over to you in just a second to detail on. But personally, as the Titan, I'm more focused on the Syntheseps. When you're surrounded by 3 or more energies, you're getting 50% glaive melee damage increase. And that's also going to be going up again next season. Not exactly sure what is going to, where that's going to land, if it's going to go all the way from 50 back up to 100 or more. We'll see. It was incredibly strong at one point. It's been walked back a little bit. We also have Worm God Caress and Winter Guile for the Titan Warlocks, respectively. Court, what's going on with Triton Vice? How does that work? And what is it doing for glaives for the hunters there?
Yeah, so I know community sentiment around Triton Vice is a bit kind of mixed. I'm more in the camp of I kind of like it. It kind of is the glaive exotic. It does everything, including, the glaive taxis. But yes, so glaive melee kills overflow 1 ammo to the magazine from the reserves, and it works kind of similar to the Syntheseps here, where while 3 or more enemies are within 15 meters of you, you get 50 reload speed and 30% increased glaive melee damage. And if you're I'll talk about our exotic class glaive in a second, but if you're matching the subclass to the glaive element, you'll get a fancy explosion AoE effect on projectile kill. Again, I'll talk about currents when we get to that. But I wanted to kind of highlight the last point about the glaive shield change, and how that's a very big buff to Vexcalibur, because the whole kind of loop with Vexcalibur is getting your Void Overshield up while you're blocking with weapon energy. And if you're just getting that passively, you can pull it up for a little bit, and yeah, you'll only get it's 12 Overshield HP hit points per second to you and your allies within 15 meters. So even if you just let that passively go, let it go up to 20% melee energy, pull it up, you'll have a little bit of your Void Overshield, and then you can pair that with all your various Void Overshield synergies that we've talked about before. But definitely that last point. I really like Vexcalibur. I love the look of it. The name is great. And it is such a nice, clean mini game when it comes to the Void Overshield. Glaive melee attacks get 20% increased damage and refreshes the Void Overshield's health to 45 HP. While you have any kind of Overshield is active, not just Void, but any kind. So it's a very fancy exotic. So that's the one that I'm going to be looking forward to on top of our class glaives. Legendaries, what are we thinking? What are we thinking, Impetus? What's on your kind of cards here?
It's got to be Greasy Luck. I'm thinking the big change here that's going to make Greasy Luck, in my mind, probably the most dominant legendary glaive going forward, is the change to the melee. Reduce the delay after firing down to 0.2 seconds. If you'll recall from when we broke down the dungeon weapons for Ghosts of the Deep, Greasy Luck gets Disruption Break in column 3, and you can pair that with close to melee Disruption Break is a big deal on glaives because the glaive melee deals kinetic damage. So being able to break that shield, get the kinetic damage buff to the glaive, and then immediately go into the melee where you can take advantage of that, and then also potentially get a kill to proc close to melee is huge. So having that drop down from 0.75 to 0.2 makes a Greasy Luck with Disruption Break close to melee, in my mind, probably the most dominant legendary glaive combo that we have. Not to say that the other ones aren't good, but if you haven't, or if you are not interested in farming for the glaive in Ghosts of the Deep, I would highly encourage you to reconsider that, because I think Greasy Luck is going to be one of the better options. Right now, it's our only rapid fire frame glaive. That could, of course, change. It's in my mind the S tier version. I'm sure there will be some debate about that. I know that our Trials Glaive Unexpected Resurgence is got some pretty spicy rolls there, but I believe right now Greasy Luck's our only one with Disruption Break and Calm 3. Got Judgment of Kel'Garath, that's our only aggressive frame glaive that gets close to melee as well. Close to melee, of course, is probably just going to be far and away the best column 4 damage perk for glaives going forward. So even if you can't get your hands on Greasy Luck, getting a glaive, getting all the glaives that you can with close to melee is gonna set you up pretty well for these changes next season. Nezarac's Whisper, that's our other arc one. That's an adaptive frame. That does not get close to melee, but it does get, is it demo? I think it's demo, right? Gotta go look at my roll here in my vault.
I was also just going to mention real quick that close to melee is a 30% glaive melee damage increase.
Yep.
3-0. Yeah.
Yeah, Nezarax gets demo in the third column.
Demo, right. Again, very useful. Definitely very, very useful. And then, of course, Lubrite's Ruin from Valve the Disciple, another adaptive frame. That big one, that gets Grave Robber Swashbuckler, which is can be very, very potent in the right Solar 3.0 builds, but also just a strong combo in general. So there's, glaives are going to be in a really good spot. Is the legendaries for sure. We'll talk about the exotic ones here next, but definitely want to keep our eyes out for any glaives that might be coming out next season. We've got a bunch of different frames, and all of the frames are represented on the solar element only at the moment. So I would be kind of surprised if we don't see the other elements get some of our other non-adaptive frames here coming up in either the next season or the final shape, but we've got no confirmation of that. But yeah, definitely be looking for close to melee. Greasy Luck with that really interesting combo of Disruption Break and Calm 3 is going to be very, very spicy with these changes. I'm trying to think which of the frames gets the best shield duration stat. I think, is it adaptives or is it aggressives that get have a really high...
I remember Greasy Luck was like pretty low.
It's the lowest. That is the big trade-off there, is that our rapid fires have a very low shield duration, but
I want to say
so many other things.
Yeah, I just looked up Judgment, and Judgment's also a base of like 25.
Okay, interesting. So maybe it is the adaptives. The adaptives are, of course, the most common type there. They've got the most represented. Should also mention, of course, Ecliptic Distaff, which was the pinnacle weapon, ritual weapon for our opening season of this year, Season of Defiance. That does have close to melee on it. It's a curated role, so that's probably the first glaive I would ever point to players, aside from the Enigma, which you unlock during the Witch Queen campaign. So those, again, really good options. Ecliptic's adaptive, so then that's got a shield duration masterwork, which is the one masterwork that you absolutely do want to get on glaives, regardless of the frame there. Yeah, it's got Replenishing Aegis, close to melee, great combo. Great combo there. Anything else to add on the legendary side there? Go ahead, Court.
Yeah, so I was going to just clarify about the frames. So aggressive are your harder hitting, more range, but it's got weak reload, it's got less magazine size. Your adaptives are kind of in the middle, but they've got the best shield duration, whereas aggressives have the middle, kind of middling shield duration. It's adaptives are your kind of in the middle, but it's rapid fires that they hit not as hard as adaptives and aggressives, don't have as much range. They've got the weakest shield duration, but they've got the most magazine and obviously better reload here. So that's the kind of vibe that they go for when it comes to differentiating the frames.
Good stuff to chase. I'll cover Winterbite, and then we'll split up and talk about our exotic glaives here. So Winterbite, of course, getting an increase to the detonation damage of the large projectile by 25%. That will absolutely be noticeable. Other thing that'll be noticeable, the self-damage blast radius has been halved, and the self-damage has been reduced. I don't remember ever doing this to myself, but it makes sense that there would be some self-damage taken by that large projectile going off right at your feet there. But yeah, this will be interesting. I have not used Winterbite since it first came out, and it was a lot of fun to shred enemies when we were doing terminal overload farming. But beyond that, I haven't really taken it into other kinds of content. Cork, did you use Winterbite a good bit? Do I remember running that with you in like raids and dungeons? I can't recall.
Yeah, I used it quite a lot for the Defiance activities, just because it was quite linear in terms of you go from A to B to C to D. So it was very easy to set up Winterbite and just cast it from kind of a far enough of range while the ads were spawning. I'm thinking of when you teleport into the pyramid ship from the EDZ, from where you normally do the public event, that kind of area. But I haven't used it a lot. I want to use it more because I think I find the fantasy around Winterbite just fascinating. And it's such a unique design of you shoot off a stasis turret that moves around and it just fires. And it's quick firing. Like it's no joke. Like it really casts its stasis kind of fire every half second. And it plays really well. It depends on what the stasis changes are next season, if it can maybe play into that a little bit better. But I haven't had the opportunity to use it a lot. And to be honest, I don't really use it as a glaive as such. I'm not really using it to jab at combatants a lot, even though you can play into the whole slow, applying slow with it with the glaive melee. But yeah, I want to use it more, is basically what it's to say here with Winterbite.
Having it out with the shield changes where you're getting access to that projectile quicker will certainly be a buff in its favor. But yeah, it's rough. I mean, it hits like a truck, but you've got 5 reload speed, 0 handling, and a shield duration of 39. So it's clunky. It's definitely rough there. You can take it out. I would not put it away if enemies are spawning in, because you probably won't have time and you might get caught unaware there. It's a rough one. Hopefully that gets a catalyst soon. I could really use something.
It's got one of the best ornaments. It's
the trident,
Neptune's scepter. Yeah, the trident.
Oh man, that does look
really
good.
It looks really cool. But yeah, next season, I really want to give it a good try, just with the upcoming stasis changes. But yeah, clunky is probably the best way to use it. But with it being a heavy glaive, it kind of makes sense to be clunky. And I forgot it's got 0 handling.
That's true. All right, let's get into those class exotic glaives. We have memed on them, crapped on them for coming up on 2 years now, and they are finally getting some changes that may make us walk back our statements here. The general changes that are going to apply to all 3 exotic glaives when you activate your special reload, and that is their gimmick, is that they do all have something that procs on a special reload, will now grant 1 ammo, meaning you can use it even if you are out of ammo. So that should make the special reload a little bit easier to activate and use. Shield energy no longer passively drains on the special reload activation. Another nice touch there. And the exotic perk no longer deactivates on weapon reload or stow. I think this is actually the biggest change of the 3. Certainly the 1 ammo being granted on special reload will be nice here, but having the exotic perk up when the weapon is being swapped to something else, say when you need to go stun a champion or when you need to reload the glaive, because again, glaives don't reload the fastest. They're one of the slower ones. It can take some time. That is going to be huge for just increasing the general efficacy of our special reload effects here. So very, very excited for these changes. I'm going to start things off with our Warlock glaive. This is the Edge of Intent. In our current sandbox, the projectile hits grant 25% weapon energy, and at 100% energy, you can special reload to fire out a healing turret. This healing turret lasts for about 15 seconds, and it shoots out little seekers to allies about every 1.25 seconds within 30 meters. And interestingly enough, it actually prioritizes allies that have not been healed already. These seekers restore 75 health points. That's not tied into the Solar 3.0 sandbox. This is just a base 75 HP, and then they also begin your health regeneration. Kind of similar to the way that those leg mods, Recuperation and Better Already, just have kind of a base health that's not tied into any sandbox effects. Next season, the healing turret projectiles will now be adapted to Solar 3.0. They will apply both Cure and Restoration. We don't have any values given, so there's no reason to believe they'd be different from what the current values for Cure and Restoration are. Additionally, the AoE radius of the healing burst has been increased to 8 meters to benefit more nearby allies, and the Edge of Intent magazine size has been increased from 4 to 5. This is pretty massive for a lot of different reasons here, but we'll go into some kind of recaps, some synergies here. Cure, as we have mentioned a few episodes before, gives you 60 health points per stack, and of course Restoration at one time gives you 40 HP per second, and then at a second time it gives you 65 HP per second. I should say the stacks of Restoration there. At 1 it's 40, and at 2 it's 65. Cure and Restoration do benefit from a Solar Fragment, Ember of Benevolence. You get 400% additional base grenade, melee, and class ability regeneration rate for 6 seconds when the healing turret will apply its effects on allies, and that duration is refreshable. So that right there is going to make the synergy really incredible for Edge of Intent. You can really buff yourself as a warlock running that when your healing turret just does its job of applying those effects to allies. You do also, for Restoration, continuing that synergy, tie into Ember of Solace. This will apply to you only. Restoration effects will last 50% longer. And of course, that's also for Solace. It does apply to the Radiant effect, but here we're just going to be talking about Restoration. Additionally, another one that will only affect you that also ties into the Restoration fantasy there, Ember of Empyrean. When Restoration is active, Solar Ability and Solar Weapon kills extend Restoration's duration by 4 seconds, up to a maximum of 12 seconds here. Very, very excited for this change. This is something that I think we've kind of been waiting for, especially after Solar 3.0 came out, after Edge of Intent dropped to lackluster reviews, is hoping that there would be something either like a catalyst or just a base update that would let the glaive tie into Solar 3.0. This has been long awaited here. One thing that I do want to bring to your attention, I'm hoping that this synergy, it does exist right now, and I hope it does carry over to next season. Per our glaive compendium that has been compiled by a series of scientists, but mostly Oni Blackmage in our Destiny Massive Breakdowns Discord, the exotic armor Karnstein Armlets, which is getting updated next season as well, does tie into the melee attack for glaives. There is a synergy there. Now let me walk through that a little bit more detail. Karnstein Armlets, melee and finisher final blows instantly grant Cure and Restoration for a short duration. That's the change that's coming next season. On a melee kill, you're going to get 1 stack of Cure and then a little bit of Restoration. If you get a glaive melee kill, as it stands right now in this season, that will proc Karnstein's effects. Hopefully next season that still is the case, and then you could run Karnstein and Edge of Intent to get a bunch of Cure and Restoration for yourself, but then also, of course, building up that special reload to put out a healing turret as well so that you can start buffing allies. I think Warlocks might finally have a really sweet close range build that will give us kind of a similar vibe to the Banner of War Strand Titan, where we're getting health, we're dealing tons of damage up close with a very strong exotic special weapon here. And of course, melee attacks on glaives don't have ammo, so it's an infinite resource there of dealing damage up close there, building up that shield, and then doing the special reload to put out a turret to kind of keep us alive as we're going around and dealing with enemies, doing various mechanics where we maybe need to stay near something like on a plate, for example. Hoping this still works next season. It's a very fun synergy. It sounds like it could be really strong. Again, once you start stacking those various Ember of fragments, that could be really, really strong for Solar Warlocks heading into the final shape. And of course, Season 23. All right, I think that's everything I want to say about Warlocks there. I just had to quickly refresh my page here. I think we're ready to go talk about what's happening on the Titan side here. Saint, what's going on with Edge of Action?
Things are looking pretty good for Edge of Action. I'm going to be honest with you. It's getting some serious changes, and I think that it honestly reminds me a little bit of a really, really old Titan subclass, ability from Destiny 1, which I'll talk about in just a second. Right now, current function, projectile hits grant that 25% energy. At 100%, you get the special reload and gumdrop bubble. The bubble will give a protective shield, and the bubble itself will last for about 20 seconds. It has 8,000 HP. When you pass through, you get a 45 HP overshield. This will synergize with Helm of 14. And so you also get the blinding effects, and I think it pumps up the overshield that you're getting when you pass through just a little bit. And then obviously having that same effect when you are in your Ward of Dawn, you'll get not only the blinding, but also the overshield, which is nice, little synergy going on there between the bubbles if you are a bubble main. In the future state, passing through the bubble will now grant bonus reload, handling, and a small amount of stacking bonus damage. The health of the bubble is getting cut way down, however, from 8,000 to 2,400 HP to account for the increased uptime and the improved effects. So you'll be able to put down more little gumdrop bubbles, and they will be giving you a much more, just benefits in general, but they won't be nearly as tanky as they were, like a third as tanky as they were prior. So definitely really looking forward to this. The Destiny 1 perk that I was going to mention, or subclass trait, is War Machine, because there was this function where when you get a melee kill and you get an overshield up, you would get this bonus. I think it was a handling and reload speed. There was no damage bonus, but still, it definitely feels like a callback to that, which honestly, I'll never forget punching something and then reloading my shotgun in like 2 seconds and then thinking, what just happened? And why did I make a Warlock first? But anyways, I'll digress. We'll talk a little bit more about the overshield and some synergies and stuff like that. Obviously you have Saint 14, and then Void Overshield in general is like a kind of a standby verb for the Titans. I've mentioned a lot of builds with Offensive Bulwark, especially a couple seasons ago. Offensive Bulwark as an aspect has just continued to be dominant in the Void subclass. Void Overshield is granting a 50% DR while it's up, so the amount of damage that it can take and the amount of damage that you're taking from sources when they hit you while you have the Void Overshield up. And then as far as what Offensive Bulwark is actually doing, I mean, I mentioned it a lot, but again, to go back to why it's so valuable, when you have a Void Overshield up, you're gaining 400% additional base grenade regen, 100% melee regen, and your melee lunge range is increased a little bit to 5.5 meters. Unpowered melee hits count is void. Powered melee hits, which, you can combine with something like a controlled demo for volatile explosions. Melee kills will refresh for up to 6 seconds on the overshield, every 6 seconds up to a maximum of 20 seconds. We also have no backup plans, which is a pretty interesting exotic. Obviously, this requires a shotgun, so if you're going to run this, it's going to have to be in a double special loadout if you were going to combine these two things together, or potentially you have multiple Titans, a whole team full of Titans if you're just going absolutely nuts. Shotguns deal 35% increased damage. This is considered an empowering buff like a well or weapons of light. And shotgun kills refresh Void Overshield health and duration. If you're on a Void subclass, you will also start health regen whenever you get a kill. So some interesting synergy there if you're thinking about running a shotgun maybe in your top slot and the glaive in your other slot, or running with some teammates that are using shotguns. Also, the whole damage, they say stacking damage, and I think it's, like kind of the big question right now is, how is this bonus damage going to stack? Is this a surge, or is this a unique benefit? Ballador's is listed as an example here. I think oh my gosh, what was the hunter exotic helmet that would grant Bacchus, right? Had a unique damage increase as well. So maybe it's going to be kind of one of these outliers like that, or maybe it's just a surge damage and it's not going to stack up as much as we think. But there definitely could be some really interesting stuff going on there to combo with the teammates, being able to grant them the overshield. They're getting no backup lance benefits, could also be getting even more of a damage increase if that effect is able to be stacked. So definitely got my mind peaked, especially with those Syntho nerfs being rolled back a little bit for the glaives in general. I'm very keen on this next season. Court, what's going on with the hunters?
So we have Edge of Concurrence. I just wanted to clarify. So Mask of Bacchus used to be its own unique damage buff, but now it's part of the Surge family.
Oh, okay.
And just to kind of highlight that point you made there, I received quite a few kind of comments and questions about what do I think. I was like an educated guess to what they would do to Edge of Action's quote stacking damage buff. I don't think it's going to be Weapons of Light. I think we like just getting a free 25% buff, I think would be a little bit too extreme. So it's why I put something like Baladors, where it only gets your 10% when your Stasis Warlock casts their heavy attack. Everyone around them gets Stasis 10% damage buff, which stacks with everything. It's its own thing. 15%, not 10%. So that's what I'm thinking might be, it could be something like that, or 10%, or it could be a surge. We don't know. There's a lot of kind of educated guesses being thrown about here, but my bet would be it's its own unique buff, like Baladors. Maybe something like 7.5%, I think would be just a nice buff to have. Because I think, Void Titans aren't, they're not... They've got plenty of options when it comes to stacking a lot of damage buffs and various exotic combinations. So.
Yeah, they need the help. That's a good point there, Court. Definitely a new super and a new aspect for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
That's a good point, actually. Yes, we will be seeing that shortly in 4 months' time. So Edge of Concurrence for our hunters here. Probably the exotic glaive that didn't really require a lot of help here. I mean, it was reasonably, because they did buff the arc shockwave a few seasons ago, if I can remember correctly. All it needed was that synergy with Arc, and it has synergy with Arc now. So the Lightning Seeker will now jolt its targets on impact, and in doing a lot of these kind of synergies, it now has reduced direct hit impact damage of the Lightning Seeker, just to account for the amount of free ammo that's granted. So that's fair enough. Again, ties back to the whole philosophy changes here that we listed at the top of the episode. Like, how safe is this going to be for this weapon to be used? The DPS, the intended role. I wasn't expecting to see them to go completely crazy with the Edge of Concurrence, because it was relatively okay. But yeah, it's got synergy with Arc now. So I mentioned Triton Vice making a very fun combo. So just to kind of re-highlight that. So if you are on an Arc subclass, projectiles kills will cause the enemy to explode. You can pair that with a few aspects here. Obviously, Jolt is the big kind of keyword. That is your intrinsic overload champion counter, so you'll see that added to the list of my champions infographic. I think that's going to be a very solid combination. You can pair that with Spark of Ions, so killing a jolted enemy creates a ionic trace. And reminder, ionic traces provide 12.5% grenade and melee energy and 15% class energy. Pair it with flow state aspects, so killing a jolted enemy grants the amplified buff and the following effects: 200% additional base class ability regen, plus 50 reload speed and a 20% reload scaler, 66% DR during your dodge animation, and pair this amplified effect with amplitude, that's your orb of power generation, and beacons. So concurrence kills create a blinding explosion. So a lot of kind of combinations, a lot of kind of down the rabbit hole in terms of synergies. Beacons plus Triton Vice, get that AoE explosion, and on top of that, another blinding explosion on top of that to just really control the battlefield here, kind of similar to my stasis build. I'm going to really try and see how this works out in kind of more middling endgame type content, just to see if, blinding's quite underutilized in the current sandbox. There's not a lot of options to kind of give you it. I think the only other example where you get pure blinding effect is from my current favorite LFR, and that is Queensbreaker. A very interesting combination here. And finally, you've got Lethal Current Aspect, which is melee hits on jolted target causes them to be blinded. Now, you will need to swap off of Edge of Concurrence for that to work, because it's something that doesn't necessarily work with the glaive. With the glaive melee. Just want to double check on the compendium for the glaive compendium here. I think, it doesn't work. It can proc it, but it will not benefit from it when it comes to flow state. And for Lethal Current, there's no synergy with Lethal Current. So you will need to swap off from Edge of Concurrence just to get your melee up. And of course, after using your class ability, the next melee hit applies Jolt and a damaging aftershock. And if you're using Arc Staff, it also damages twice. So again, it's not a lot of changes compared to the Titan and Warlock glaives, but it didn't need much change other than the synergy with Arc. And I'm very happy with the changes here. And the other two glaives, I think we're all in agreement that the Warlock one needed the most amount of help here. I think we can argue that the Titan and the Hunter ones were doing just okay. But to see some really great reworks here, some nice synergy, it's identities for each of the glaives here is really, big thumbs up from the three of us. I was actually thinking while you were listing the changes there, Impetus, with Edge of Intent. So pre-Solar 3.0, we had, for Middle Tree Solar Warlock, we had Benevolent Dawn, which was flattened down to be Ember of Benevolence Fragment. I'm just wondering if we might get a little feeling, because Benevolent Dawn was very powerful. Like, you would get your grenade, your melee, and your rift energy back really fast when you paired that with Guiding Flame and Divine Protection. That was your kind of old healing grenade kind of synergy back then. But I was just thinking, with that duration refreshable, that turret now being a little bit more powerful, it's applying Cure and Restoration a lot more often. I'm just wondering if we might get back to that same synergy that we once had with Benevolent Dawn. Because I know, Solar Warlock has a little bit of an identity issue with it only being a healing class, and it's a bit one-dimensional. Just wondering if you had any comments there, Impetus.
I would have maybe saved that for when we're not recording and Bungie devs could have, heard that point. That's kind of my thoughts on the matter personally, Court. Fingers crossed. And if we can't get to that point, sweet. If we can't get to that point, I'm just going to take what we got, because it's still going to be really interesting, especially with hopefully still being preserved that Karnstein synergy. I think that'll be quite powerful in content where, glaives are a viable option. So this will be really, really nice here. And again, Solar Warlock getting that new aspect and Super coming in final shape. This seems like it's going to age quite well moving into our final expansion beyond Season 23. So, I'll just kind of sit here and wait and see if we get Unstoppable Glaive in the next few seasons. And if we don't, that's okay, because I'm still going to find a way to try and rock this. I think we'll definitely have to do another GM with the class Glaives next season, right?
Oh, yeah. Got to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
All right, I'll finish things off here with another kind of global change to a certain archetype, and then I'll pass it back to Impetus for the exotic weapons. So, sniper rifles. The upcoming changes increase the sniper rifle PvE damage with a flat buff of 15%. This applies to exotic sniper rifles that use heavy ammo. I don't think they didn't explicitly mention the special exotic sniper rifles, but I'm assuming it will also apply to them as well. So we're talking Cloud Strike, just to as a reference there, Borealis, all that kind of jazz. So again, we've mentioned this before. We mentioned it in this episode. Snipers are in that kind of precarious position. Bungie's philosophy when it comes to sniper rifles is they do not want to go back to, sat in the back of the room of a certain strike in Destiny 1 with Fogoth, because I did that with Icebreaker, and boy, it was boring. But we'll see. 15%. We do have Rock on next week, so we'll be discussing some of these changes when it comes to DPS, just to get his perspective. And the big one that everyone's looking kind of like biting their nails and wonder if this will be finally Whisper of the Worm's time. That is our big. It's got the potential. It's one of those weapons out there that has one of the best total damage DPSs. And again, we'll chat to Rock on all the terminology and where Whisper may position itself. But we also have some legendaries, of course. We've got Succession, we've got Praedyth's Revenge, we've got Supremacy. You guys got any other kind of highlights you wanted to shout out here, exotics or legendary?
Cloud Strike's going to be kind of hot, I think. With this,
Catalyst gives it triple tap as a reminder.
Yeah, that lightning damage is pretty nice. Like, I know that like Whisper of the Worm is like the thing that immediately comes to mind. That's my next go-to there. And yeah, I mean, other than that, Secession, it's a classic. It's such a great weapon. Reconstruction, recombination, or honestly, reconstruction and any perk of choice in the final column there is probably going to serve you well. Supremacy with kinetic trimmers is like fun to use. I don't know if that's going to like be a meta thing, but it's definitely fun to use, and I'll take that one out for a spin.
So in my clan, when we like to take people through Kingsfall for the first time, we will often recommend using Whisper the Worm on Oryx, as it's a very easy one phase. Just have everyone sit in the well, got that big old crit multiplier applied to that big old chest spot, and you just go to town once White Nail gets procced. So I'm sure some folks in my clan will be quite happy for that. Again, of course, you can use other things on Oryx, but that's kind of been for some of our older folks in the clan who remember the time when Whisper of the Worm was a bit more of a viable option. It's kind of been one of those moments where it's like, you know what? I'm going to bust this out and use it to relive those glory days on the Taken King. So, yeah, I'm sure that will be music to their ears, of course, for Whisper. I don't know. I mean, I don't feel the need to really have sniper rifles, especially when Bungie's making such excellent strides in that short-range engagement space for us. So, if they get buffed up to a nice spot, sweet. And if they don't, I'm fine without them. But I think the three legendary snipers that we mentioned there, Succession, not so much Praedyth's Revenge, but definitely Supremacy, are the two that are in my rotation the most. Again, if Garden does get refreshed next season, there is a sniper rifle in there that wasn't much of a PvE
Omniscient
standout.
Eye, right?
Yeah, I think that it was probably known more for PvP. Not that it had a stellar perk pool, but again, that could change next season. Be very interesting to see where that lands if it does get a glow up. Of course, Supremacy got a hell of a glow up when Last Wish got refreshed. So, fingers crossed they can carry that kind of energy over into whatever raid we get refreshed next season. Should it be Garden? Should it be something else? So, yeah, we'll see. That's kind of how I feel about sniper rifles. They're now slowly getting there.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm sure maybe it's not something they've talked about, or it's maybe a future change, but I'm sure Chris said something about Whisper might get like its own overhaul, or maybe not an overhaul, but its own little change at some point. Maybe not next season, maybe it's something in the future, but I'm sure I remember something like that, unless I'm mistaken. No,
I remember that. It feels like it was a long time ago.
I don't know. It might have actually been on our show that he mentioned Whisper, because I know we mentioned Darcy and Whisper the Worm, and Darcy is something that they're not really looking at actively right now,
right?
Or back then. But yeah, definitely Whisper the Worm was kind of earmarked for a mini overhaul of some some type, but maybe something that we'll see in the future. But 15% damage buff, I'll take it.
For sure. All right, let's get into exotic weapons here. Quite a few were outlined, some surprises, okay. Let's start off with Vex Mythoclast here. Increased damage is pretty much in a nutshell what's happening to Vex Mythoclast here, but it's been broken out in some very interesting ways. So the increased damage against rank and file enemies by 10%. Remember, it's exotic primary weapon, so it already had an increased damage against rank and file enemies by 40%. That's now being boosted by this new buff come Season 23. Increased damage to bosses by 25%. And then the one that was really surprising, increased damage to champions by 200% when in the linear fusion rifle mode. So again, there's a little mini game that goes on with Vex Mythoclast. You got to fill up a little bar, and then you can overcharge it into a linear fusion rifle. That mode is now getting a massive buff against champions. I'm shocked, I'm surprised, I'm overjoyed. I mean, really nothing to be mad about here. It seems like Vex Mythoclast is furiously trying to claw its way back into the spot that I think a lot of us would kind of hold a Quicksilver Storm and Osteostrigi in right now, where it's just a fantastic primary weapon. It's everything you could ever ask for in a gun. It mows down rank and file enemies with ease, and then you can kind of get into that high-powered mode and clear out majors and champions quite easily. So it'll be nice to have Vex Mythoclast as kind of the Quicksilver Storm of the energy slot. Very, very happy with that. And wow, 200%. That's going to be noticeable. Again, want to make sure the champion is stunned before you fire off that linear fusion rifle shot to really take advantage. Otherwise, the champion DR is going to eat up most of that 200% buffed damage. But increased damage to bosses is going to be nice as well. Again, it's not... The linear fusion rifle mode is just going to get 25%, not the 200%, because that's unique to the champions. But didn't really think Vex needed a huge damage buff, but hey, we're getting all sorts of damage buffs here. Now,
well, after that GM run we did,
we don't talk about the champion run.
I initially purged that from my memory bank until I saw this in the weapons preview. I was like, oh yes, I remember Saint Impetus and we tried to run the European battleground with 3 Vex Mythoclasts, and we got to the first area, and we were just like, you know what, let's go back to orbit and put on something better.
Yeah, let's go swap back to the class glaives.
Put that took that memory and pushed it right down, you know.
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll be a different run next time Europa GM comes up and fusion rifles have an artifact mod. All right, we've been talking about Revision 0. This will be the last one I cover, and then I'll pass you back to Saint for our next few exotic weapons here. Revision 0 increased damage to champions by 100%. Boom, bang. There you go. How do you like that? As a reminder, Revision 0 does come with the Vorpal weapon perk as one of the craftable options. So you can certainly stack up some buffs. And of course, it also has a high power damage mode, a sniper rifle mode. Very, very interested to see how that plays out. I think one of the big concerns right now is whether or not that sniper shot with this buff will be able to fully pierce a barrier champion shield, because Revision 0 does have intrinsic anti-barrier. I think it's been kind of a big complaint of the gun right now, especially with the prevalence of Wishinder and Arbalest, both in the same exact slot, kinetic slot there. Wishinder, of course, gives you a ton of super energy due to how the arrows function with dealing damage. So it's one of those things where Revision would be, I think, really, really interesting. I know, Saint, you like Revision 0 a lot there. Would love to see that be a possibility. And if it is a possibility, I mean, my goodness, this is going to be a really dominant weapon for sure. You guys got any extra thoughts you want to add about this? Saint, I know you love Revision 0. I use it mostly in PvP. I haven't been too interested in the PvE applications for the gun. What do you run on your Revision 0? Because I know you use it in PvE a lot.
Yeah, I'm running 4 times the charm and the Vorpal perk on it, because my thought there was, okay, exotic primaries already dealing increased damage to my lower tier enemies. I might as well try to capitalize on that and go with Vorpal running against champs. And I'm not I'd have to go back and double check on this, but I'm pretty sure that it was doing about half a champ's shield in prior GM runs. I try to go back and look for some clips because we were joking about Vex. When we left from Vex, and I was like, forget that. I changed to Revision 0 and had a much better time. And I believe that it will deal about half of the shield damage, which, if that is true, would mean that this buff is going to be just enough to make it, be able to one-shot that shield. I'm not sure if that is going to require you to be running Vorpal on the weapon, but, I think that would make sense. Okay, if you're running Vorpal, if, you're in a PvE activity, you're investing into that side of a little bit, it will allow you to one-shot the champ shield, which I believe will be the case. I'll have to wait and make sure whenever this actually hits the game in a few weeks here. But yeah, we'll see. I'm definitely really hyped up for this. If the Hunter's Trace round is able to one-shot the barrier shield, I'm like, this thing is going to be locked into my loadout all season for the GMs. I'm absolutely going to be loving using this. Unless I'm using the Class Glaive Gumdrop, of course, right? Obviously, that,
Certainly.
Yeah,
because you can it's up to 4 bullets, right? 4 sniper shots.
And you can, and 4 times will work on the sniper shot. So you can get 6 off if you really time it. You land all those shots. You can you could pop the shield, and deal some crazy damage there. It's, really solid.
Yeah,
really solid.
That would be huge. All right, good change there. Saint, I'll pass you back for the next 2 here. Some interesting changes. I'm a little cautious about these.
Certainly interesting. Thorn is next up on the list. First up, picking up a Remnant can now overflow the magazine up to 40 rounds. Currently, picking up a Remnant will grant Soul Devour, which increases the poison damage and will give you 4 ammo back. Now, it's going to be just going absolutely crazy. We also have its Catalyst coming up next season. This will passively grant 20 range and 10 stability, range historically being the absolute weak point of this weapon. Getting kills or picking up a Remnant grants additional range, handling, and mobility. No specific stats given on that yet, but it seems kind of like ultra killing wind on top of the fact that you're getting the increased poison damage, and it already has 20 better stability than it did prior from a base, which, just absolutely insane. As a reminder, this is a Weapon of Sorrow, and it has some synergy there. Necrotic Grips and Touch of Malice, Blight Shot, 50% increased damage. So you want to do some poison stuff in PvE, or maybe dealing some damage to something that was hit by a Touch of Malice charged with Blight Shot. You'll be dealing 50% extra damage there as well. I am for sure excited to use this in PvE. I think that it is going to be an absolute menace in the Crucible. Impetus, this is kind of your home field, especially with the necrotic build. You ever run necrotics much? You ever take Thorn out for a spin? How you feeling about the upcoming changes here? It's Catalyst, it's buff, all this stuff.
Well, there's one Weapon of Sorrow that I do use quite often. I don't feel the need to run Necrotic Grips with it. We'll be talking about it in just a second. It's Osteostriga. That is also getting changes. I haven't run Touch of Malice a ton. I don't feel the need to have... Again, it's one of those things where Touch being a scout rifle plus the exotic perk chipping away at my health, I just don't want to take that gamble, I guess is probably the right way to say that, in PvE, especially high-level PvE. I'm sure it would be quite fun to rip through things in lower-level content, seasonal activities and such, but I don't feel the need to do that. Thorn, though, with Necrotic Grips, I'm very interested to see how that plays, especially if I can get 40 rounds in my hand cannon. That would be pretty sweet there. Getting that tick damage, getting Soul Devourer, all that fun stuff. That seems really enticing to me. So I think this will probably be the first time I do bust out that Weapons of Sorrow synergy. Even though Necrotic's been around for so long, and some of these other Weapons of Sorrow have been around for a while, and we keep getting new ones. So yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic about this, but I haven't really had a huge need to really touch into that synergy. I'm much more interested right now in Lumina and Boots of the Assembler, the anti-weapon of sorrow synergy. That one I do use a lot, and I have nothing but positive things to say about it. So
very cool. And unfortunately, Osteostriga is not quite as well off as Thorn is when it comes to the changes. Removed the SMG damage bonus scaler that was affecting poison damage. This brings Osteostriga's poison down to match the standard necrotic grip poison. It will still deal 40% bonus damage against rank and file, square icon, or red bar enemies. This is also going to continue synergizing with those weapons of sorrow, like we mentioned before. This seems like a weird change to be coming in this far along the line. I have to think that I maybe this was just seen as too strong in comparison with Thorn, and it was brought down a little bit. Not really sure, but I know that there's some warlocks out there, especially, that this one will hurt a little bit. Any thoughts, gentlemen?
Can't really argue against it, right? I mean, goodness, this thing's been so strong.
Yeah, I'm more surprised it took us this long for Osteo to get a change. Because it has been very strong. And it goes back to the point I made a couple, maybe last season, where some exotics do need to be brought down for others to rise. And, Thorn's it's not weak in any manner, and especially won't be after these changes for next season. I'm just looking at the stats now. That's going to put it up to, the Catalyst will bring it up to 69 range. It will have 65 stability, and then when you pick up a Remnant, you get more range on top of that. Handling is probably going to get maxed out because it's already got 85, and then mobility out of the blue there. For some reason, we're getting mobility on top of that. We're just getting everything thrown at Thorn. But yeah, like something like Thorn and Touch of Malice, and we'll talk about Necrochasm in a second here as well. Some of these weapons, for them to thrive, I think Osteo had to take a hit, which is fine. Like, I think we've had a nice run with Osteo. I don't think it's going to be bad. Like, I think a lot of folks may take this, this is a big nerf, we're not going to use this anymore, we're going to use something else. But I think Osteo's just going to do just fine without the massive kind of bonus scaler it was receiving from the SMG's damage. And then the poison damage is just going to be matching necrotics. So might take a little bit more kind of time to ramp up that necrotic grip poison effect if you are pairing with that. But yeah, I think it's just going to do just fine.
All right. Yep. We got a few more perks. Court, what's going on with our perks next season?
Yeah, so we've got three preview changes for some here. We've got Danger Zone, which was very surprising to see. I think out of all the changes we were reading on this preview, this is the one that was just like very big eyebrow raise.
Still trying to make it work, man.
Danger Zone, small change to how Danger Zone works on rocket launchers. And the weapons team added a little comment here. You can figure it out for yourself when season 23 drops. So we've been theorizing here. It's probably something related to like rocket jumping, using rockets to kind of bump up your jump and mobility speed here, flying around everywhere. So that's probably what they're alluding to here. I'm not sure if I'm going to be using Danger Zone on my rocket launchers. I'm assuming you fire at your feet and you'll do 1 damage to yourself, but still do a lot of damage to the enemies surrounding you. But yeah, we'll see how that works out. Precision Instrument, which I know we've not been that friendly with in terms of perks. I know we haven't really recommended it whatsoever. They've increased the enhanced precision instrument damage bonus at max stacks from 26% to 30%. So that's one of those perks where you basically have to keep hitting in order to ramp up that precision damage bonus. Saint, I know you were talking about this in, I can't remember which server you were in discussing precision instrument. Do you have any other kind of comments?
I think I'm really interested in this change because it will it will increase the rate at which you're getting, your damage is stacking up. Because if you're looking at, I think before it was hardly noticeable at all. It went up by like 1% total damage or something ridiculously small like that. And when I say that, I mean 26% versus 25% on the total damage. Now it's going up 5% in total damage, which means that you will see almost a full percent damage increase across each one of the stacks. So, we're about a 0.8, 0.75 increase per each damage stack that you're adding up, meaning that on your first, shot, you're getting closer to 5% rather than 4.15. And your second shot, you're already up to 9% damage or so, whatever the case may be. This is going to definitely help it bring it in line with a perk like explosive payload, which is honestly what I see this type of this trait like competing against is, IMO, because it's going to fall off after 1.25 seconds. I definitely think that this is going to increase the viability of running the trait and give weapons that it appears next to with explosive payload just a little bit more interesting of an argument. And maybe in some other weapons like Fang of your Ute, the scout rifle from Crota's End, rapid fire strand frame there. It's got me thinking a little bit now. It's may at least be worth your time a little bit more when it comes to competing with some other traits like, sword logic, golden tricorn. Maybe precision instrument finally has a strong argument with its enhanced version.
Yeah, I was just looking at what weapons roll precision instrument in terms of the ones that you can enhance. And yeah, Fang of Our Utes obviously their kind of top choice here with it being a rapid fire. But Briar's Love from this season's weapon collection. We also have Word of Crota if you're more attuned to hand cannons. And I think that's it in terms of... Oh, Igneous Hammer as well. You can't enhance that. Yeah, so not a lot of choices, but looking forward to future. See if we can really make that work, because it's something I kind of want to make work, because it's rewards you for landing hits by increasing your precision damage. So it makes sense for those kind of longer ranged weapons like scout rifles. But we'll see.
You can also, we were talking about Fang. Now it really got me thinking, because you can get rewind rounds on Fang.
Yes.
And that really plays into precision instrument well. And also, I just doing mental math here. Before it was 25 divided by 6, or pretty much is how you get all those weird numbers. But 30 divided by 6 is just 5. So you would definitely be getting 5% increase per stack of precision instrument that you're able to maintain on that precision damage. And that, so you're talking 5, 10, 15% just in 3 shots. And you've already overcome explosive payload. And if you're able to continue landing those shots, it's without a doubt now going to outshine Frenzy or explosive payload, which... it's got me thinking.
Finally, we have kinetic tremors, which I know we were kind of wishing got a little bit of a tweak with some of the archetypes, and we do have some tweaks here. So pulse rifles, at the base perk, they've reduced it from 12 hits to 11. Enhanced has actually been increased from 9 to 10. And for non-burst sidearms, we have at base, it's reduced from 12 to 8. The enhanced has reduced from 9 to 7, so some tweaks there. Any thoughts? Do we know if that will be kind of anything that might kind of drift towards a specific pulse or non-burst sidearm?
Man, if only we had a kinetic aggressive frame pulse rifle in a raid that hadn't been refreshed yet. That's immediately where my mind goes.
Interesting.
That's too bad. Man.
Just have to wait for the final shape raid, I guess.
So Vault of Glass is getting the rework next.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Non-burst sidearms. My mind goes to Buzzard, but you can't even what sidearm? Yeah, what sidearm can get enhanced kinetic tremors? What am I missing something here?
Take a quick look on D2.
Also, I can't even be bothered to even think about that.
It's not even worth a cognitive, load of thought, dude.
That I'm guessing that's just a future change because there's nothing.
Non-burst.
We've
I was going to say.
Well, watch out next season. We're getting I'm telling you right now, we're getting a sidearm with kinetic trimmers. I'm telling you, it's going to be
Must be the new dungeon.
Raid.
Yeah, that new dungeon loot, baby. Also, this doesn't get at the core issue of kinetic trimmers on weapons that are able to proc it too quickly and then reproc it, because something like Showrunner came out this season and there was all this hype surrounding kinetic trimmers on an SMG, the DPS, and then it really fell flat when everybody realized that you couldn't reproc kinetic trimmers until it had completely finished its animation and damage. And so you can't proc kinetic trimmers more than once when shooting out an entire mag from a weapon like the Showrunner, and that still does not get at that core issue. But it is nice to see a part of the issue for the complaint of the trait has been addressed, right? I can't complain too much. It's a buff. It's something. It's nice.
All right, I'll round things off for this episode with some future changes. So everything we've been talking about is coming season 23 at launch. There's some other kind of changes coming halfway through, but they're all related to PvP, so we've not touched on those things. But for the future, I think they're kind of specifically referring to Final Shape launch. We have heavy grenade launchers are getting a substantial, quote, ammo inventory buff. No idea what that means. We'll ask Rock next week what he kind of thinks, kind of educated guesses. The big kind of question we wanted to ask him anyway was, where do heavy grenade launchers kind of exist in the weapons sandbox when it comes to DPS? Because we certainly don't really see much potential. So we'll see where that positions heavy grenade launchers. Again, this is a far kind of, it's 4 months from this point that we will get a final shape. So I've got a little bit more time for that to brew. Next up, we have Necrochasm. So we talked about it at the top of the episode when we're talking about auto rifle changes. So Necro's getting all of those changes, plus the poison damage duration has been extended for the damage over time from the Curse Thrall perk trigger. And its catalyst is being overhauled from Outlaw to what they're naming as 1 for Thrall. And it grants a moderate period of increased damage, range, and aim assist after you damage 3 enemies in quick succession. And unlike the 1 for All perk, damaging 3 more while this perk active refreshes the timer. So that's not something you can do with 1 for All. You have to let the timer decay to 0 and then reapply its effects. So we haven't actually seen 1 for All or Stats for All really being used much for a lot of the kind of weapons recently, which is fine. I think it makes sense to kind of semi-retire some of the older perks. Not saying it's been completely retired. We've seen it a few times recently, but it's not as prominent to say, like collective action, which we've seen on pretty much every weapon. But yeah, so Necro's getting that changes. And just before I pass it back to these guys for some thoughts, we've got some buffs to the following exotics: Truth, the Colony, and Dead Man's Tale, and plus more exotics. Again, that'll be all final shape. So looking forward to what they do to Truth, because that is the memeiest of guns.
I thought they forgot about that gun. Holy moly.
Me too. Whenever anyone mentions Truth, I keep thinking they just mean the Destiny 1 version, because I forget it's in Destiny 2. All right. Impetus, thoughts on these 3 points here?
Yeah, heavy grenade launchers kind of feel like the one weapon archetype that we've got left that doesn't have a defined place in PvE. Again, PvP, they're very popular weapons for that heavy ammo pickup during a match. Necrochasm, again, I'm still working on even unlocking the catalyst, so I'm glad that this isn't happening right now, because I want to wait and get my catalyst unlocked for the 1 for Thrall thing, but I think that'll be okay-ish. Again, I think Necrochasm is in a kind of a weird spot where I'd rather use Osteostriga even after the nerfs that are coming for Osteostriga. I just think the tracking projectiles and the decent damage, plus the overfilled magazine, is so much more suitable to my playstyle. But Yeah, maybe if there's some melee synergies that kind of open up next season, that's where Necrochasm I think will really shine with that Curse Thrall perk trigger. So I'll see, but the Catalyst doesn't really excite me in the same way that the Thorn one does, with just the crazy amount of stuff that's going to be happening there. But again, we'll see how much range, aim assist, and damage happen after you proc one for Thrall. And then, of course, buffs to exotics that need buffs. Always a huge fan. Love that stuff. How about you, Saint?
I like Necrochasm. I definitely agree with the sentiment that it needed more for its catalyst, especially considering to get the catalyst, you needed to do the raid like a lot or get obscenely lucky. But still, it was a higher requirement than probably the vast majority of players are going to reach for getting the Necrochasm catalyst. So to see now the catalyst is now it's its whole unique thing, and it does something that nothing else does. Definitely makes me happy. Definitely feels at least more justified for the amount of time that it's taking you to get this catalyst thing completed. So definitely better than Outlaw. I would say it's just safe to say there. Really curious to hear Rock's input on what it would take for the grenade launchers to be pushed into a meta type scenario for total damage, and that way, we have a very clear, kind of line to compare it to whenever we actually get all the details in this buff. We can kind of go back and reference our conversation with Rock and think, okay, well, what was the thought on how many, how much of an inventory increase it was going to take to like push them into the meta, and then what did we actually get, and how does that kind of shake out? We can have an idea when the new season lands in about a month. And yeah, Dead Man's Tale, I like a lot. I honestly wish it had gotten some slightly better PvE traits when it got its like craftable rework. So I don't know what they're gonna do to that thing, but I still feel like it could do slightly more in PvE, even though it is a good weapon. Don't get me wrong. A lot of fun to use. Still a pretty solid weapon. I think it could have gotten a little bit better offering as far as, I think it got like rapid hit and shoot to loot, maybe, where if I'm remembering correctly, where it's, traits of note. I got no idea what they can do to truth to buff that thing up. I'm absolutely the most curious about that one.
Me too, because it's such a strange, exotic rocket launcher. I mean, we've got some really great, unique rocket launchers when it comes to Destiny 2. We've got 6 at the moment, but that one just falls really flat. It really is something, it was built in a sandbox within a sandbox that no longer exists. Like both sandboxes were completely overhauled. So just to give a perspective, yes, it has those 3 shots in the magazine. It's got that tripod that we saw in Destiny 1. It's the only rocket that has intrinsic 3 shots from the get-go. But it's got aggressive lock-on, aggressively tracks. It's got proximity detonation, so it does no impact. So you're already at reduced damage when it comes to truth. And it's just, I'm really curious what they're going to do to truth. To keep its identity of 3 shots, its aggressive tracking. If they want to go for that whole air burst rocket launcher, maybe they'll add some sort of like, well, we know Dragon's Breath's coming in final shape.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Like, I can't even suggest doing like an air burst where it sends out like some void fragments and stuff, because we've got Dragon's Breath that does that with the napalm solar effect. So who knows? I'm looking forward to it, but yeah,
we'll take anything.
Colony.
Yeah, hey,
to be honest, I'll take
it. Just needs
1,000 damage increase.
We just give it target lock, so that whenever you land your subsequent shots, if you use them all on the same target, like the 3rd shot would hit for. Would
that even work with target lock? Because I'm sure it's an impact-based trigger than an explosion.
I don't deal with the sandbox and the engineers and designers. I'll leave that to Chris and Ed Merck and their teams to figure it out.
Yeah. some great changes. If I was to pick, so I'll hand it back to you guys before we close things off. But if I was to pick one change that I'm really looking forward to, if I'm like the first thing I log in, do all the usual business for season 23, but the first thing I want to try out is definitely the 3 exotic glaives for sure. Impetus, you got a highlight you wanted to?
I mean, I'll definitely be checking out the Karnstein Armlet synergy with Edge of Intent there. I want to see if that's still active, and then just see how strong that is. Well, obviously at the start of the season, just going through seasonal activities, and there won't be a power increase, so it should be pretty strong. Hoping it's going to be really strong, but that'll be really cool to kind of work on, and again play that really up close melee focused Warlock build. We don't have a lot of those outside of well, Sunbracers doesn't even. I mean, it's technically a melee build, but you're not using it for the melee.
It's a grenade build. That's a melee build. That's really a grenade build, you know?
Yeah. Melee to trigger and then grenade spam.
Yeah, I think Revision 0
Saint, you got any highlights?
Is probably my kicker there. I already like the weapon. It's just it's 12.5% base buff, 100% champ buff. I'm really keen on that. And we'll see how much of a Synthos glaive nerf walkback are we talking about? Because I'm really keen on the synergy there.
Yep. Yeah. Very interesting changes. All right, final thoughts, or is that it for this week?
That's it. I think I'm spoke my piece. Impetus, you good?
I'm good, sir.
Sweet. Well, that was episode 84. We once again want to thank you, the listener, our patrons and sponsors, and of course our audio engineer Autodidaktos for keeping us sounding immaculate. Once again, we've been saying it throughout this episode, and we announced it last episode that we will be joined by Rock DC for our very first Destiny community member interview, along with another PvE university topic as we dive into the deep, mysterious world of damage and DPS. We hope you can join us then. Until then, my name is Court. You can find me over on various social media websites as Court Projects. You can find my spreadsheets and infographics over on the D2 spreadsheets link tree, along with many other spreadsheets, applications, websites, and all that jazz to enhance your Destiny experience. You can also find that over on the Destiny Massive Breakdowns website. Impetus, where can we find you?
My name is Impetus. You can find me by that name in Discord and in Destiny, hanging out playing PvP, working on new builds and such, and all other kinds of things. Saint, where can we find you?
My name is Saint Kabr. You can find me by that name on various social media or hanging out in that Destiny Massive Breakdowns Discord server. Thanks for listening to another episode of PvE.